First contact with human potential. The quantum stealth hull of the Varaxian scout vessel Unwavering Doctrine slipped through Earth's upper atmosphere, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to even the most sophisticated human detection systems. Captain Nazara stood at the primary observation deck, her iridescent scales shifting through patterns of blue and green as she studied the small blue planet. "Preliminary scans complete, Captain," announced Science Officer Telex, his four arms working simultaneously across multiple holographic interfaces. "The species designates itself as human, pre-spaceflight civilization with rudimentary nuclear capabilities. Military technology approximately 2 centuries behind Varaxian standard." Nazara's membranous eye shields clicked as she processed the information. The Varaxian Imperium had been expanding its sphere of influence for millennia, cataloging thousands of worlds and species. This was supposed to be another routine reconnaissance mission. Observe, assess, and determine whether the indigenous species warranted further attention or could be safely ignored. "Begin targeted observation of their military training facilities," she ordered. "The High Command requires comprehensive analysis of potential resistance capabilities." Lieutenant Krell, the ship's tactical officer, manipulated the sensor array to focus on a complex of buildings nestled in a mountainous region on the northern continent. "I've located what appears to be an elite training facility, designated Special Forces Training Center, according to their communication networks." The main view screen shifted to display a group of humans trudging through mud and rain, carrying heavy packs while instructors shouted at them. Several of the humans appeared to be on the verge of collapse. "Primitive endurance training," Krell observed with a dismissive flick of his tail. "Inefficient and crude." "Continue observation," Nazara commanded. Something about the determination in the humans' faces gave her pause. Over the next 3 planetary rotations, the Varaxian team watched with increasing interest as the human training scenarios unfolded. What had initially seemed primitive began to reveal layers of complexity that defied their expectations. "This makes no tactical sense," Krell muttered on the second day. The humans were now engaged in what appeared to be deliberate sleep deprivation while solving complex logistical problems. Why would they intentionally compromise cognitive function during critical thinking exercises? Science Officer Telex's scales shifted to a thoughtful violet. "I believe they're inducing stress conditions to simulate actual combat situations. They're not training for ideal scenarios. They're training for worst-case scenarios." As the observation continued, the Varaxian team witnessed training exercises that seemed deliberately designed to push humans beyond reasonable biological limits. In one particularly grueling scenario, a team of 6 humans was dropped into a simulated hostile territory with minimal equipment, compromised communications, and conflicting intelligence reports. "They should fail," Medical Officer Ziv noted, her specialized sensory appendages analyzing the human's biological responses. "Their cortisol levels are dangerously elevated, sleep deprivation is affecting neural function, and physical exhaustion is approaching critical threshold." Yet the humans didn't fail. They adapted. When their communications equipment malfunctioned, they developed an impromptu signaling system using available environmental resources. When faced with conflicting intelligence, they developed a decision-making framework that incorporated uncertainty. When one team member showed signs of physical breakdown, the others redistributed weight, adjusted formation, and maintained unit cohesion. "Fascinating," Telex whispered, his scientific detachment giving way to genuine admiration. "They're not just following protocols. They're innovating in real time." By the 4th day, Captain Nazara called her senior officers to the analysis chamber. The holographic displays surrounding them showed continuous feeds from the human training facility, along with detailed biological, psychological, and tactical analyses. "I believe we need to reassess our initial classification of this species," she stated. "Science Officer Telex, your assessment." Telex's scales rippled with excitement. "Captain, these humans demonstrate remarkable adaptive capabilities. Their approach to military training differs fundamentally from our own. where Varaxian military doctrine emphasizes perfected execution of established protocols, humans seem to be cultivating the ability to function effectively within chaos. Lieutenant Krell remained skeptical. With respect, their technology is still primitive. Their physical capabilities are inferior to Varaxian standard. They represent no significant threat. I disagree, said Medical Officer Ziv. Their biological responses suggest untapped potential. They're intentionally inducing biological adaptation through stress. It's almost as if they're using training to accelerate their own evolution. The debate was interrupted by an alert from the sensor array. The human training scenario had suddenly changed. What appeared to be a genuine emergency had occurred. A structural collapse had trapped 3 humans under debris, with hazardous weather conditions hampering rescue efforts. This is not part of their planned exercise, Telix confirmed after analyzing communication patterns. This is an actual crisis. The Varaxian team watched in stunned silence as the human response unfolded. The trapped individuals immediately implemented survival protocols, while the remaining team organized a rescue operation with ruthless efficiency. What impressed the aliens most wasn't the humans' physical strength or technical skills. It was their psychological resilience and improvisational abilities. One human in particular caught Nazora's attention, a female leader who, despite sustaining injuries, coordinated the rescue operation with remarkable clarity. Under her direction, the team repurposed training equipment into rescue tools, established a medical triage system, and executed a complex extraction strategy, all without specialized rescue equipment or external support. Their adaptability coefficient exceeds anything in our database. Telix reported, his scales now a bright purple of scientific excitement. They're not just surviving chaos. They are harnessing it. As they watched the successful rescue operation conclude, Captain Nazara made a decision that would alter the course of interstellar relations. "Update our mission parameters," she announced. "This is no longer a standard reconnaissance. We are witnessing something unprecedented, a species that has turned limitation into advantage, chaos into opportunity." Lieutenant Krell's membrane shields narrowed. "Captain, standard protocol dictates." "Standard protocol is insufficient here," Nazara interrupted. "What we're observing requires a new approach. These humans don't train soldiers the way we do. They're not creating perfect executors of established doctrine. They're cultivating problem solvers." The crisis had revealed something that routine training scenarios couldn't fully illustrate: the true extent of human potential when facing genuine adversity. It wasn't just their actions that impressed the Varaxian team. It was the underlying mindset, the refusal to surrender to limitations, the ability to transform desperation into determination. "Continue intensive observation," Nazara ordered. "I want complete psychological profiles, tactical analyses, and biological assessments. The High Command needs to understand what we're dealing with here." As the unwavering doctrine maintained its silent vigil above Earth, the Varaxian team began to realize they weren't just studying another primitive species. They were witnessing a fundamentally different approach to the evolution of intelligence itself, one that might eventually challenge the Varaxian Imperium's position in the galaxy. What had begun as a routine reconnaissance mission was becoming something far more profound. First contact with a species that didn't just survive challenges but transformed them into opportunities for growth, and the implications were as terrifying as they were fascinating. The evolution of understanding. 3 weeks into the observation mission, the command deck of the unwavering doctrine had transformed from an orderly military installation into something resembling a research laboratory. Holographic displays covered every surface, each projection cataloging some aspect of human potential that defied conventional Varaxian understanding. Captain Nazara reviewed the latest analysis from Science Officer Telix with growing amazement. These training scenarios, they're not just about physical preparation. They're comprehensive psychological conditioning. "Precisely," Telix confirmed, manipulating a holographic representation of neural activity patterns observed in human trainees. Where our military preparation focuses on perfect execution of established protocols, humans deliberately introduce uncertainty, equipment failures, and conflicting information. The most recent training exercise they'd observed involved a simulated hostage rescue in an urban environment. What made it remarkable wasn't the tactical approach. It was the deliberate introduction of cascading equipment failures, false intelligence, and changing mission parameters. They're not training for success, medical officer Ziv observed. They're training for adaptation to failure. Lieutenant Krell, who had remained skeptical throughout the mission, could no longer deny the evidence before him. Their approach is chaotic, unstructured, even primitive by our standards, yet undeniably effective. The tactical officer had spent days analyzing a particularly revealing incident where human trainees, faced with complete communications failure, had developed an impromptu signaling system using environmental resources. It wasn't just the technical solution that impressed him. It was the speed with which the humans transitioned from established protocols to creative problem-solving. A high command must be informed of these findings, Nazara decided. This species represents something unique in our catalog of potential contact civilizations. The transmission to Varaxian High Command was meticulously compiled. Hundreds of terabytes of observational data, psychological analyses, tactical assessments, and biological studies. The conclusion was unprecedented in Varaxian reconnaissance history. Humans weren't just another pre-spaceflight species to monitor or eventually subjugate. They represented a fundamentally different evolutionary approach to intelligence itself. The High Command's response was swift and unequivocal. Terminate observation immediately. Return to Varaxian space. Classification. Potential threat. Recommended action. Containment. The command deck fell silent as the implications became clear. Containment, in Varaxian military doctrine, meant isolation of the species until a comprehensive strategy for either assimilation or neutralization could be developed. This classification is incorrect, Telex protested, his scales flickering with agitation. They've misinterpreted our data. Humans don't represent a threat. They represent an opportunity. Lieutenant Krell, who had once been the most skeptical, now found himself in an unexpected position. I must concur with Science Officer Telex. The High Command's assessment fails to recognize the unique potential of human adaptability. Captain Nazara faced the most significant decision of her distinguished military career. The Varaxian command structure was absolute. Disobedience was not merely a violation of protocol, but a fundamental betrayal of their species' most sacred principles. Yet the evidence before her suggested that the traditional Varaxian approach was fundamentally flawed when applied to humans. Containment wouldn't work against a species that thrived on overcoming limitations. "I require privacy for tactical consideration," she announced. The command deck cleared immediately, leaving Nazara alone with the holographic displays of human training exercises. Unknown to the captain, Lieutenant Krell had begun his own unauthorized research project. Fascinated by human adaptability, he had compiled a separate analysis focusing specifically on how humans transformed limitations into advantages. His quarters had become a shrine to human ingenuity. Walls covered with examples of improvised solutions, psychological resilience strategies, and tactical innovations born from desperation. When the ship's systems detected his unauthorized research and automatically reported it to Captain Nazara, she didn't respond with the expected disciplinary action. Instead, she summoned Krell to her private chambers. "Show me what you've discovered," she commanded. Krell's unauthorized analysis revealed something even more profound than their official observations. Humans didn't just adapt to challenges, they seemed to require them for optimal development. Their greatest innovations, their most significant evolutionary leaps, all emerged from periods of extreme adversity. It's as if limitation is their catalyst for growth, Krell explained, displaying evidence spanning human history. Where Varaxians seek to perfect existing systems, humans thrive on disrupting them. For 3 days, Captain Nazara secluded herself, reviewing all available data while the rest of the crew anxiously awaited her decision. When she finally emerged, her scales had settled into a pattern that none of her officers had ever witnessed before, a complex arrangement that signified a fundamental shift in perspective. "We will not return to Varaxian space," she announced, "and we will not implement containment protocols." The command deck erupted in astonished whispers. Never in recorded history had a Varaxian captain directly countermanded high command orders. Instead, Nazara continued, "We will initiate first contact." The shock that rippled through the crew was palpable. First contact protocols were reserved for species that had achieved interstellar capability. To invoke them for a pre-spaceflight civilization was unprecedented. "Captain," Telix ventured carefully, "the consequences." "I am aware of the consequences," Nazara interrupted. "But our observations have convinced me that traditional assessment metrics are insufficient when applied to humans. They represent a fundamentally different approach to evolution itself, one that the Varaxian Imperium must understand, not contain." The decision made, preparations for first contact began immediately. Traditional Varaxian protocols were modified to accommodate human psychological patterns. The initial contact team would consist of Captain Nazara, Science Officer Telix, and most surprisingly, Lieutenant Krell, whose unauthorized research had provided crucial insights into human adaptability. The site selected for first contact was the same military training facility they had been observing. The reasoning was precise. If humans truly thrived on challenges and unexpected situations, then diplomatic contact with an alien species would be best handled by those specifically trained to adapt to unforeseen circumstances. As the unwavering doctrine cloaked above the human training facility, sending local detection systems into chaos, Captain Nazara addressed her crew one final time. "Today we redefine the Varaxian approach to interstellar relations. For millennia, we have categorized species according to their potential threat or benefit to our Imperium. But humans cannot be so easily classified. They are neither superior nor inferior. They are different in ways that challenge our fundamental understanding of intelligence itself." The descent module separated from the main vessel, carrying Nazara, Telix, and Krell toward the human facility below. As they approached, they observed with admiration the rapid reorganization of human forces, not into attack formations, but into a cautious defensive perimeter that simultaneously protected their people, while signaling openness to communication. "Remarkable," Krell whispered. "No panic, no disorganization. They're adapting to our presence in real time." When the module touched down in the central training yard, they were met not by weapons, but by a carefully arranged reception committee. At its center stood the female leader they had observed during a rescue operation weeks earlier, now revealed to be Commander Sarah Chen, the facility's training director. The first words exchanged between Varaxian and human would be studied by xenolinguists for generations to come. "Welcome to Earth," Commander Chen stated simply, displaying neither fear nor aggression. "We've been wondering when you'd introduce yourselves." Captain Nazara's translation implant rendered her response in perfect English. "You knew we were watching." Commander Chen smiled. "We detected anomalous atmospheric disturbances 3 weeks ago. When our instruments couldn't identify the cause, we adapted our training scenarios to potentially draw out observer interaction." The revelation stunned the Varaxian team. The humans hadn't just been training. They had been performing for an audience they couldn't even confirm existed. That's why the scenarios became increasingly complex, Telix realized. They were testing our reaction thresholds. "We figured any species advanced enough to achieve interstellar travel and cloaking technology would eventually get curious enough to make contact," Commander Chen explained. "So we decided to show you what humans do best: adapt to the unknown." As the initial diplomatic exchange continued, Captain Nazara realized that her decision to disobey high command had been the correct one. Humans weren't just another species to be cataloged and classified according to Varaxian standards. They represented a fundamentally different approach to existence itself, one that embraced limitation as opportunity, chaos as catalyst. The traditional Varaxian path to advancement had always been through perfection of existing systems. Humans offered something different: perpetual reinvention, constant adaptation, the transformation of obstacles into stepping stones. "We have much to learn from each other," Nizara stated, extending one scaled hand in a gesture of alliance. Commander Chen accepted the gesture without hesitation. That's what humans do best: learn, adapt, grow. Welcome to a new kind of partnership. As the diplomatic discussions began in earnest, Lieutenant Krell realized that the human training facility had prepared them for this moment, not by teaching them what to do, but by teaching them how to think. The true strength of humanity wasn't their technology or their physical capabilities. It was their cognitive flexibility, their psychological resilience, their refusal to accept limitation as destiny. The Varaxian Imperium would never be the same after this encounter. Neither would humanity. What had begun as a routine reconnaissance mission had evolved into something far more significant: the beginning of a partnership between two species who approached the universe from fundamentally different perspectives, but shared a common desire to transcend their limitations. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson the Varaxians learned from human training facilities: that true advancement comes not from perfection of the known, but from embracing the unknown.